We met in 1989, and it was Vinod's 43rd birthday party at his house. And I didn't speak to him during the evening. And then when we were leaving, my friends and I, Vinod came to see us off at the door, at the lift. All the way up the stairs and down the stairs were bouquets of flowers. So I said, what are you going to do with all your flowers? And he said, I'm going to keep them. And I said, but, why don't you give them to a hospital or something? Because there's so many of them and they'll die. And he just looked at me and he said, my flowers never die. I think that was the gardener in Vinod, because he had been Osho's gardener. He was very spiritual from when he was a child. When he was 17, and he bought Autobiography of a Yogi. And at the time, he said that he didn't realize it then, but Osho was in the bookstore at the same time. The tipping point from giving up this unbelievable material life that he had, the adoration he had, the adulation and the success, was when there were a number of deaths in the family within 2 years. When his mother passed, he just went to Osho, took sannyas, and I think that's where the intensity and, the fullness of the journey started. Vinod was Osho's gardener. So I think what that meant was that Osho's home was private and very few people had access to it. But if you were the gardener, you were there in his garden. So, but that was his seva. The other thing he used to do is, especially in Oregon, is, Osho had these fabulous flowing robes that they would design for him. And all of them used to be tried on Vinod. So because their shoulder size, it was Vinod's shoulders, and the energy there was so high. And at that time, they were doing so many groups and there was so much going on. It was a very physical engagement with your spiritual practice. So there were some courses that Vinod was allowed in, which were meant only for the foreigners who were there. And these were the encounter groups. And then there was Osho's intensity. Even when he was in Bombay, before he moved to Pune, they'd had the meditations on Chowpatty Beach in Bombay, which is right in the center of, this throbbing city. And they did everyone took their clothes off and they were meditating naked in a circle on the beach. There was that. But apart from all of this, there was the knowledge. He was just such a contra guru and so scandalous in what he said. I know that Vinod was not there looking for, the physical part of it. I think his journey was a spiritual one with immense commitment and devotion. Osho was very much in silence and was not engaging with the people of the commune. And as he got withdrawn, his secretary took complete control and charge of what was happening. And they built a city, and I think they wanted to win the elections. And just crazy things happened there. And they had their own army with, I think AK-47s or the equivalent of AK-47s. No one could understand what was going on. Sheila was, I believe, and, I heard from everyone, was tyrannical. And then there was this whole thing about the water supply being poisoned. And then Vinod had fallen ill. And so there was a lot of fear. And it was not just the fear for him. For him, a very, very critical issue was that he had not seen his children. And he used to tell me that he would just be crying and couldn't go back to India, because if he went back, he wouldn't be able to come back. Luckily, his cousin came and, got him out before the whole thing fell apart. And then Osho was arrested and Sheila was arrested, and Sheila, of course, stayed in jail. And I think Osho has hinted that he knew that it was insider. So let's assume that the Guru's journey is to take you through trauma and then to hold your hand through it. It was not full circle. When he left Oregon, he was very, very, very traumatized. And not just internally, but it had external expression as well. He told me that he would go on set, deliver an amazing shot, and come back into his van and then be weeping and weeping. After he left, he did not go back to the Pune ashram. He did not go back and meet Osho. He didn't do any of that. When Osho came back from Oregon, he came to Delhi. Vinod drove him to Manali. They spent a month there. And then when they got back, Osho said to Vinod that I want you to be, in charge of the ashram now in Pune. And Vinod said that for the first and only time, I said no to my guru. So that was it. Vinod didn't meet Osho after that. And he got back into the film industry and, then was doing extremely well. I had a longing for a living master. I remember it so clearly. He was reading the newspapers. It was the Times of India, front page. And there was a photograph of some guru who had come. And it was to Bombay. And it was big news because 1,100,000 people had gathered to see this person. He looked at it and he said, Kavita, this is the guru for you. Don't miss this time. I think Vinod had more of an understanding of who this person was, and this person was Gurudev, Shri Ravi Shankar. We were at a private satsang in Bombay, and then people were asking questions. Someone said, Vinodji, got the mic to him. And Gurudev said that Vinod has no questions, but Vinod, you can ask for the others. And that to me was a big, big, big one. For Gurudev to say that Vinod has no questions, Vinod immediately got it. Vinod immediately knew who and what this presence was. He knew that this was the full stop. It was 2001. Vinod had a diagnosis of lung cancer. Gone for his annual checkup. And, they saw patches in the lung. He used to smoke 40 to 80 cigarettes a day. And went to the leading MRI specialist in Bombay. And they all confirmed that it was definitely lung cancer. They said that, look, we'll have to remove half of a lung, but everything will be normal. You'll be able to do everything you're doing, and life will go on as usual. So we thought that, yes, so all he has to do is remove half a lung. We did not tell anyone. Only Vinod and I and the doctors knew this. And we told Gurudev that, Gurudev, this is what's happening, the surgery, and we want your blessings that everything should go well. So he said, why you want to do the surgery? So, why don't you wait a little bit and do some breathing? And then Gurudev said that go to AIIMS, to the head of oncology, and see whether she thinks it's all right for you to wait for a month or two, and do some breath work. So we went and we had a meeting with her. And she said that as an oncologist, I can tell you that it's all right to wait for 2 months. Gurudev said, कि फिर तुम आश्रम जाओ, go to the ashram and we'll have a teacher there with you. And Vinod, you have to do the Sudarshan Kriya 3 times a day. So now here we are in Rishikesh, and beautiful, to be with him in the ashram. And everything was so light around Gurudev. That I think Vinod really, really appreciated. And he couldn't believe that, with the kind of rules and the, everything was so regimented. Yeah. And here it was just, everything was flowing and so beautifully. In harmony. There was so much of fun and laughter. Vinod got put into a certain group. And there were these people who we were doing the program with were from villages, and, they were tall, and they were all walking, and they were so happy. They couldn't believe that they were with, Vinod Khanna, this great action hero, and, they were all walking like this. And so we did the Kriya, and later we went to Germany, and one evening Vinod got this terrible pain, which was like, shoulder, like somewhere here. And so he was just lying in bed for two days. Then Gurudev came to see him, to see how he was, and then said, why don't you get him to go and have an X-ray? And so Vinod went and had the X-ray done, and there was no broken rib. But the important thing is there was no cancer. It was just unbelievable. There was no cancer. And we came back via London, and they saw all of Vinod's reports, the ones that had been taken in Bombay, and, the ones that they did afterwards, the before and the after. And there was no cancer. And the doctors could not believe it. They said, no, we know how India is, and, reports get mixed up and all kinds of things happen. They just could not accept that there'd been a complete cure. I wouldn't even say a reversal, but a complete cure. And then no lung cancer came back. Vinod was full of love for Gurudev. He was full of love and gratitude. He would always tell me, he said, you're so lucky. He was just so impressed and so complete with Gurudev. We came in 2010, again when Vinod had cancer. But this was, it hadn't come back in the lungs. His lungs stayed absolutely fine. He had bladder cancer. And the prognosis for bladder cancer, his prognosis was that if he did everything that allopathy had to offer, there was a 25% chance that he would be alive after 2 years. And so when he learned this and, what that whole thing would mean, so then he called Gurudev. Vinod said to Gurudev that I've led a full life. And if my time to go has come, I'm ready to go. But I don't want to torture my body. So Gurudev said, "Fir tum ashram aa jao." So what happened was we came to the ashram and did the Panchkarma. Then in a year, so 2 years from when he was first diagnosed, the cancer had gone.
Sure.
And even for that, we had the reports. We were in America, we did the scans there, and it was gone. First thing we did was we called Gurudev and told him that Gurudev aise hua hai. And I was speaking to him and so happy. And Gurudev was so stern. He said, usko bolo, pina band kar de, nahi to sara ulta ho jayega. Because Vinod loved a drink, a drink or two or maybe more in the evening. So he said, nahi, tum usko bol do, Gurudev ne bola. I said, Gurudev, you tell him yourself. And then a year later, sort of thought that, okay, this is completely behind me now. And then he was still in very good health, but it started declining. And then he died finally of the bladder cancer. He had complete faith in Gurudev right up to, the last conversation. That is who we were taking guidance from. It was straight from the heart, and it was a recognition that this is the one, and don't miss this time. I'm really grateful to him for bringing me to Gurudev.